Hi, today we're going to be learning about a certain topic in physics which is fundamental to learning kinematics. And this is because a lot of topics in physics have to do with concepts and we need to understand how they work in order to actually do physics. So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to become an expert on Newton's laws of motion. And my name is Ashley. So I'll start off by saying that this took place in the 16 and 1700s, way before modern physics, Einstein, and the atomic model. This was when Sir Isaac Newton, or a British man who was a mathematician, wondered about motion and how it worked, and what forces actually were. Do we actually use force when we walk? And is motion something relative to someone, such as motion relative to the earth, or is it universal? To understand how do objects actually move, we also have to understand what motion is and what its opposite, nature of rest, is as well. This concludes to Newton's first law of motion, which is the basic one and easiest to remember, which states that every object will remain in the state of rest unless acted upon by a force. Now let's break this down into rudimentary steps so we can understand better this concept and actually do some physics with an experiment. For example, if we have a circular object on a surface with or without friction, and I'll tell you why this is different in a minute, if we apply, as you can see here, a force, which could be a hand gesture like a push of the object or the wind, the circular object will eventually start to move, and if it is on a frictionless surface area, then it will move forever or infinitely. However, if there is friction applied, that counts as a second force, and therefore it will stop moving. Now, Newton's second law of motion is pretty tricky and probably the hardest one. We have to understand that Newton actually used mathematical evidence for these, so they're not just theories. That's why they're called laws. But this law states that acceleration is dependent on the net force acting upon an object and its mass. Now, you're probably wondering, what does this all mean? What acceleration is? And what does mass have to do with anything in these laws? If we did not talk about any of these topics during the first law of motion. Well, I'm going to teach you an equation which is easy to understand for the second law, which is F equals ma, stands for net force equals the mass of the object times the acceleration. Now, you should know this, but in other words, or in simple words, this means that if the force of the object on the object actually, or in this case the net force to be specific, increases, then A, or the acceleration of the object, will also increase because they have a direct relationship. Now, finally, we reach Newton's third law of motion. This is the one I find most interesting because it doesn't always have to be about forces. But in this case, we're talking about physics, and this means that every force has its equal opposite force acted back upon it. Now, this is my definition, but Lin-Manuel Miranda, when he was writing Hamilton, actually wrote lyrics for this, which state that every action has its equal opposite reaction. And this was said by his character Thomas Jefferson, and this shows that it relates to not only forces. However, this also states that forces occur in pairs. Let me explain why. If we have a man here, and we have another man, and if the left man is pushing, while the right man is also pushing at the same time, they're not the same person, by the way, and just ignore that the second person is upside down. they're actually pushing with the same force. And this is exactly what Newton wanted you to know when he was writing these laws, with mathematical evidence, by the way. But if you're still stuck, I have created a little game for you guys to understand more in depth about the laws of motion. So we're going to match the law with the correct definition. So here we have Newton's first law, Newton's second law, and Newton's third law. Here are each definitions, and they're not in order, so we have to put them together. Now, are you ready to answer the questions? You can go back into the video to see if you're stuck, but I'm going to tell you the answers. Are you ready? Number 1 is Newton's third law. Number 2 is Newton's first law, and number 3 is Newton's second law. Now, if you still stuck and you think that you are not going to make it through the year in physics, don't worry about it, because physics is a complicated subject. However, practice makes perfect. Thank you for watching.